All right. Our speaker today is Dave Warnock, a former evangelical pastor and now atheist, was diagnosed with ALS, a terminal illness, in 2019. He's spending the time he has traveling and speaking about seizing the moments and approaching death as an atheist. All right. Dave Warnock, you're unmuted and ready to present.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Good? Yes? All right. Well, we were supposed to be there in person today, and we had meetings scheduled in Northern California, and then we were going to go up through Oregon to a conference in Vancouver, and all of that got canceled, obviously. So anyway, here we are on Zoom, and good to see everybody. Sorry I can't be there in person, but we do hope that down the road we'll be able to reschedule our California trip. I want to introduce my girlfriend. She's in the pinks. Wave, Bevan. That's Bevan. We're here in Charlotte, North Carolina. She will, whenever we do get out to California, she'll be with me. So hopefully get to meet all you guys in person once this COVID stuff is over with. So everybody stay safe and out of harm's way until things kind of get back to some semblance of normal. If that ever happens, I don't know what normal is going to look like anymore after this. I had to get some more water, and if you noticed, you probably saw them in my PJs. So why get dressed, right? Why do anything? You're staying in the house. I was diagnosed, as Matthew mentioned, with ALS a little over a year ago, February 26th of 2019. And since then, it has been an interesting journey, to say the least, in terms of what I've been doing with my life, and what I'm focusing on and what my life looks like. If any of you are familiar with ALS, I'll just give you a little. I'm not assuming that anyone is. It's obviously something you can Google and find out details about it, but it's more commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a terminal disease with no cure and no treatment, at least right now. There are things on the horizon that show some hope, but they give you 3 to 5 years to live from onset of symptoms, and that's a very vague diagnosis. It's a very vague idea of life expectancy. And what we've learned in the last year is that the disease is very unpredictable and affects every single person differently. There are no two cases alike. What we've also learned is that mine is moving fairly slowly. So a year ago at this time, I didn't know what I would be doing or what kind of shape I would be in or how long I'd be alive or any of those things. I'm 64 years old. I'm be 65 in a couple of months. And so I just thought, a year ago, I thought, well, I'll just travel and live as much life as I can, as well as I can, until I run out of time, and then I'll turn out the lights, so to speak. What that evolved into was this Dying Out Loud tour, like is what we call it. It just kind of happened organically. We didn't sit down and plan it with a marketing team or anything. I just started talking on podcasts and YouTube shows and started booking meetings like yours all over the country. Unitarian churches, Oasis, Sunday assemblies, humanist meetings, free thinkers meetings. And we found out that there was an interest in the things that I was talking about. And the things that I am talking about, we call it dying out loud, but it's really more along the lines of living out loud. And so what that means to me, what my focus has become, is talking about facing death as an atheist, contrasted to a view I had years ago as an evangelical Christian. And I don't know how many of you came out of that tribe, but that's a world wherein God is very present, God is very involved in our lives. He answers prayer. He has a plan for your life. There's a will of God. Everything is viewed through the lens of what's God saying and what's God doing and what's God's will. That was the life I lived for 37 years. I was born into a non-religious home. I wasn't raised in any particular faith structure. My parents were, maybe my mom kind of believed in God and had been a Methodist when she was younger. She dropped my brothers and me off at Methodist churches every now and then, hoping we'd go in and catch a little God. But she didn't go. We didn't go as a family, so it never really was a factor in our home. So what happened to me is shortly after high school, I got swept up in the Jesus movement in the 70s and became a Jesus freak and did street preaching and coffeehouse ministry. I was so convinced in 1974 that Jesus was coming back any day now, any year now, and that was 1974. That was 50 years ago, almost. And to my knowledge, he still hasn't returned. If he did, he slipped in and no one noticed. But I was so convinced that was imminent and that I felt an urgency from the Lord to see people born again Christians. That was our thing. So I didn't go to college because I didn't have time for that. I didn't feel like I needed to spend time getting a college degree and trying to have some kind of a career. Although before this, I wanted to be a sports writer. I wanted to be a writer. Excuse me. So I just felt like I needed to be busy about the business of the kingdom, winning souls and helping people find God and find their purpose in his kingdom and their will, God's will for their lives. So I began to do that with a very enthusiastic zeal and did that for the next few years. And then I met my wife and raised a family and still did all of that within the confines of the evangelical charismatic church movement, which is a charismatic, I don't know if you know what that is, but it's kind of an independent Pentecostal in style, evangelical fundamentalist brand of faith. Like I said earlier, it has to do with God being very present and involved in our lives. It also has to do with the Bible being the inerrant, inspired Word of God. It wasn't just a book that we looked to for good ideas. It was a manual for living. And that's how we viewed it. And for 37 years, I treated it like it was the Word of God, and I studied it and I taught it. I was a pastor for many of those years on staff at churches at different points in my life in different places, mostly scattered between Arkansas and Tennessee. I grew up in Arkansas and then moved to Tennessee in my midlife, and then that's where I was until just this past year. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina now with Bevan. But all of those years, raised 3 kids to be Bible-believing evangelical Christians. And then about 2008, 2009, I was on staff at a church. And I just began to experience some real deep issues with God's presence in my life and the lack of seeing that. And so what happened over the next couple of years is I began to really examine the roots of my faith and the origins of my faith and the origins of the Bible. And I, after a year and a half of careful examination, I came to the conclusion that the things I believed all my life and given my life to were false. And it was all wrong. I had made a mistake. I'd made a drastic mistake in terms of how I viewed the world. And I shifted 180 degrees from believing God was present and real, the Bible was his word, to simply not believing any of it. I didn't step down, so to speak, into more progressive forms of faith. I didn't look for a Unitarian church to become a part of. I didn't look to some progressive brand of Christianity that wasn't as dogmatic. I just simply said, no, if the Bible's not real, if the Bible's not God's word, if it's not true, then I don't need any of it. And I shut the door on all of it. And that was, interestingly enough, this being Easter, he has risen, by the way. That's a joke. You're supposed to say he has risen indeed. But you can't because you're muted. Interestingly enough, when I started examining my faith in a very real way, authentically, I began to look at the Bible as, I began to just write down passages in the Bible that were problematic, that were contradictory, or that had conflicting ideas and views. Because in my view, God was the author of this thing. God was the one whispering in the ears of men who were then writing it down as his word. And when I saw that vast portions of these writings were in contradiction to one another, blatantly in contradiction, one saying one thing, another saying a thing that's exactly opposite or different from what the other person said. And one of the areas I focused on was, in fact, the resurrection story as presented in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I saw that each of these authors depicted that story, that event, differently. Now, they were small details, like how many women went to the tomb, was the stone rolled away, or did an angel roll it away? Were there two angels? Was there one? Was the angel inside, or was he sitting on the stone? These were details around it. The central part of the story was that Jesus was raised from the dead, right? Hence, we have Easter. But my thinking was that if this was the pivotal point of Christianity. In fact, the Bible says, if Jesus is not, Paul said it, who's the author of Christianity, by the way, Jesus wasn't, Paul was. He said, if there is no resurrection, then our faith is in vain. So evangelical Christians tie everything to this day, Easter, the resurrection. It's a shame they don't get to have their high holy day today, and they're all locked in their homes. Actually, it's not a shame. I'm kind of finding some perverse delight in that. But nonetheless, everything about the salvation story, the gospel message, hinges upon the idea of Jesus being raised from the dead. So if this is the climax of the story, if this is the pivotal moment, I would think that God would make sure to get the details right, to get it down right, that he would have someone taking some notes and get it down right, because if we get this wrong, we messed up the whole play is wrong if we miss this key moment. And the facts are they didn't get it right. All the details are wrong. The stories are all conflicted. And when I saw that, it occurred to me that it became obvious to me. It didn't just occur to me. It became obvious that it was a man-made document. It was just men writing down stuff, and had been, and all throughout, from Genesis to Revelation, was men writing down their ideas of how the world works and how God was involved in their lives, or how a deity or whatever their view of God was. And once I saw that, once that became clear to me, then the rest of the dominoes of my faith fell rather rapidly. And I was able to let it go pretty quickly. Now, that's not to say it was easy, because all my life, my whole world was involved in this. It was my world. It was my life. Everyone I knew, or I was, my family, my friends, extended family. I didn't know a single atheist. I had never encountered what I would consider an atheist in my 55 years of living, or 54, whatever age I was. So I was completely lost, completely alone. I felt very disoriented and traumatized. I did not know who I was or what I was going to do next. I was still married to a woman who continued to embrace that faith and in many ways doubled down in it and began to go to more Bible studies and more prayer meetings than ever. And I was at home sorting out my life and trying to figure out how to stay married to a woman who believed things that I was becoming increasingly having difficulty with. Things like the idea that we're born broken and messed up and sinful and we need a Savior to save us from who we really are. And that being taught to children, the idea of a vast majority of the human population over time being sent to eternal damnation in hell. And on, I had problems with the way that Christianity, evangelical Christianity, was presented to the world as the only way to live, the only way to believe. And in fact, in this country, so many of our laws and ideas about how to do society are based upon individuals' ideas of what Scripture teaches and what God's will is. And we've seen this in the last 3.5 years more than ever. But it's been a problem all throughout the history of this nation. So all that to say that after a few years of trying to balance and navigate that difficult world of living in a household where we were not in sync in any stretch of the imagination, my 3 kids were raised and living on their own and married. So I ended that marriage about 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago, and basically rebooted my life at the age of 61 and just decided that I don't know how many years I have left. I don't know what's next, but I know I can't keep living the way I'm living if I want to have any quality of life. And so I began to live about 3 years ago by my mantra, if you will, was stitched on a throw pillow that I have, and it just said "Carpe the fucking diem," which translated from Latin means "seize the fucking day." And so that began to be how I lived my life, and that was before the ALS diagnosis. And I was just living as an atheist. I wasn't much of an activist. I wasn't doing anything like this. I was selling insurance, which, does it get any more boring than that? But I was having a good life, and I have a lot of friends I was living in Nashville, Tennessee, and I have a lot of friends who are ex-Christian atheists, and we have a vibrant group there that we meet regularly, and like you guys do. And we just have a community of people that I was doing life with. Sadly to say, when I left Christianity, it cost me a lot in terms of relationships. I lost most of my friends. I lost family members. My 2 adult daughters we pretty much quit having a relationship with me. So I don't see them. I don't have much communication with them or my grandchildren. I have 6 grandchildren between the 2 daughters. I do have a relationship with my son. He and his wife live in New York City, and they pretty much let go of their faith a few years ago as well. And so they don't have near as much problem with their dad being an atheist as my daughters do. But my daughters just have difficulty getting their heads around me not believing what I taught them to believe. And so they've chosen to keep their distance from me, and that's been a difficult journey and a steep cost that I've had to pay for being honest with myself. So all that to say that this has not been an easy or lighthearted transition for me. But I will say that I wouldn't do anything differently than what I've done. For me, when I came to the conclusion that I no longer believed, I felt like I owed it to people in my life, family and friends, to let them know. I didn't want to live a double life. I didn't want to live a false life. I didn't want to live in secret. And I know people that do, and I don't fault you for that. It's people have to make their own choices as to how open or out, if you will, they want to be. But for me, it was worth, I don't know if it's worth the cost, but I had to live as an honest person, I wanted to live an authentic life and be who I was and not have to tiptoe around and worry about who knew what about me. I just wanted to be who I am. My voice gets hoarse when I talk a lot, so I have to drink a lot of water. So fast forward to February of last year. And like I said, living my best life in Nashville, enjoying life, and then I started having these symptoms of ALS, and I didn't know what it was for quite a few months. The symptoms really started up in early part of 2018, really, spring of 2018, looking back. I didn't realize what it was, but I knew I was having more difficulty. My symptoms are in my hands and arms, fingers. I began to have a loss of strength in those extremities and noticed that I was having more and more difficulty doing daily chores like opening packages and buttoning buttons and things like that. So after a few months of Googling symptoms and trying to figure out what it might be, I went and got some doctor visits and testing and got the formal diagnosis in February of last year. At that point, and just to, again, back to the ALS part of this thing, if you don't know, what this means is that I will gradually continue to lose strength in parts of my body until muscles quit working. And like I said, my arms right now, it could go to my legs, it could go to my mouth, and breathing and talking become difficult, eating becomes difficult. So we don't know where it's going to go next or how long it's going to take to get there. But right now, as I said, it's only in my arms area. So I need help doing things that normal, healthy people don't have a problem doing. When all this travel got shut down, the trips that we had scheduled, the calendar was pretty full through the first half of this year. And we were going to England and to Germany and Amsterdam and France and lots of cool places, and doing a lot of these kind of meetings, which I love doing. But the hard part for me was to shut that down, not knowing what my situation is going to look like a year from now. You know, normally you just say, well, just reschedule next year and do it next year. Well, I don't know what kind of year I've got. I don't know how long I've got where I can travel. Travel becomes more and more difficult. I have to have someone with me to help me with little things like luggage and credit card slips and things like that. So having to shut it down and hope to reschedule was a very demoralizing experience for me in that it feels like time that I don't have, that I may not get back. And that's minimal compared to people who are struggling with COVID. Maybe they have it, or they have loved ones who have it, or they've lost jobs or income. I understand there are bigger issues than what I'm dealing with, but this is my issue, and it's what I have to deal with. So what we did, excuse me, and by the way, I'm going to talk until I'm tired of talking or can't talk anymore. And then we're going to do Q&A, and I will say this as you're preparing your questions. I know each of you are going to have 4 or 5 questions. No questions off limits, and I'm an open book, so anything that you're curious about or that you want to ask me is perfectly fine. And I'll talk about some other issues in a minute before I go to Q&A. But the dying out loud thing, as I said earlier, it just became an outflow of me. Once I got the diagnosis, I quit working. I moved out of my apartment in with some friends, and I began to make plans to travel and to just do the things I wanted to do, not knowing how long I had left. And I didn't want to spend the last 2 or 3 years of my life just working, selling insurance for what? Why? And then we began to book the podcast and the shows that I started doing, and I started hearing from people and other groups that wanted us to come talk, and we started booking traveling, and it just became a thing to where I found that people wanted to talk about, strangely enough, people need to and want to talk about death. As difficult a subject as it can be, the reality is we're all going to experience it. And it's nothing to be afraid of. It's nothing to try to avoid. We do want to live as long as we can, most of us. But more importantly than that, in my opinion, is what kind of life we're living. What's the quality of my life? I'm someone who's more interested in the quality of life than I am in the quantity of the number of days that I can live. I'm not trying to get every single day out of life that I can. I want to get every bit of life out of the day that I can. And so that was the balancing act that we've had to do in the last year. Me realizing that my death down the road is going to affect Bevan, my partner, more than it will me in negative ways. It's going to affect my friends more than me. For me, I will be exiting, and then the people that I leave behind are the ones that have to deal with my loss and missing me and those kinds of things. But the actual death itself is nothing more than the natural result of living. That's just what death is. And so when I started talking about these things, facing death as an atheist, whereas my former view, this life was just a preview or a staging area for eternal life, eternity, where each of us, when we pass, we either go to heaven or hell. That was the idea that I had. That's what evangelical Christianity teaches. And in so much that I call it a fetish for the afterlife that they have, wherein this life is minimized and everything is focused on eternity. What's heaven going to be like? Eternity with Jesus. Eternity with my loved ones. I'll see my grandma again. I'll see my spouse again. All those things, those fantastical ideas that we'd all like to believe, but it's a made-up story. I think those of us who deal as humanists, we deal with, as you said earlier, Matthew, we deal with what's rational, what can be verified, what's reasonable. We deal with reason and logic, not with fantasies or wishful thinking. We watched a movie the other night called The Invention of Lying. I don't know if you've seen that, Ricky Gervais. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's very entertaining. But in it, they deal with the idea of how people, I don't want to give away the punchline, but it's pretty much the main theme of the movie, that the idea of an afterlife was invented by people who don't want this life to be all there is. They don't want to think that I'm just going to close my eyes and that's going to be it. Well, I'm sorry, but that's how it is. And wanting something to be so doesn't make it so. And the other part of that equation is, why is this life not enough? Why do we need to think or want there to be more than this life? Why do we feel like we need an eternity? Really? That's a long time if you haven't done the math. We can't even get our heads around it. No one can even conceive of eternity. But that's the fantasy line that's been sold by religion. And so people have been curious to hear me talk about facing death as an atheist coming from that background. And it really hasn't been that big of a deal for me. I learned a long time ago when I left Christianity, when I let go of faith, I realized that this was the life we had. This is it. early on after my diagnosis, someone sent me a poem, and it's called "My Soul Has a Hat." And I'd urge you to look it up. It's a long poem, but it's very good, and it has to do with the brevity and the beauty of life. But the last line of the poem says this: we have only 2 lives, and the second one begins when you realize you only have one. And when you let go of the idea of an afterlife or an eternal life or heaven or hell if you've been a bad boy, when you let go of those things, then this life becomes that much more precious and that much more beautiful and that much more wonderful and meaningful. When there's the thought of an afterlife, it's very tempting to minimize the days that we have in this life. But so when I began to carpe the fucking diem, I started living as though this were my only life. And I started looking for ways to maximize every moment and to make sure that I didn't let life just happen, but that I lived it intentionally with purpose and with me having the understanding that I'm writing my own story. For a lot of years after I lost faith and pretty much lost my daughters out of my life, I was sad for a long time because I didn't feel like I could live my authentic life. I was trapped in a marriage that wasn't working and connected to a person who did not share my worldview. We didn't have anything in common to share and to keep us connected. And so I felt like I was trapped in a sense, and I became aware of the fact that I wasn't writing my own story. I was letting other people write my story, and I wasn't happy about that. And so when I took back the pen and rebooted my life and began to write my own story, that's when I began to realize that that's what makes us happy. Even if bad things happen, like ALS, you get a bad diagnosis, I still have the ability to write my own story. I didn't write ALS into this story, but as it happened to me, and as I got the diagnosis, I have the ability to either embrace it and accept it and then figure out how to make the most of it, or I can get angry or resentful or bitter or sad, and then I'm continuing to let something else write my story. Whereas the way that I'm doing this now with Dying Out Loud and getting up every day with this mission, if you will, in the forefront of my thinking, it has allowed me the ability to take the pen away from ALS and say, no, I'm going to write my own story. You're not going to write it for me. And that leads me to the final thing I talk about, which is the Final Exit Network. If you haven't heard of this group, it's a nonprofit, finalexitnetwork.org. There will be a link to their website on our website soon. They're redoing their website, so we're waiting till it's done to put it on ours. But they're a group that I became aware of about a year ago and began to investigate. And in the last few months, I've begun to form a more organized official relationship with them as kind of a spokesperson, and because I talk about them all the time anyway. And when they found that out, they wanted to connect with me. And so we've kind of entered into a partnership because I believe in what they do. And they simply do this. They give control back to people like me, people who have a fatal diagnosis and who have been told that your life is going to get worse and worse and worse until you begin to suffer more and more and more and lose control of more and more things. And then when God's finally through letting you suffer, then you'll die. That's what we've been told in America, that you can't take that out of God's hands, that God decides when you die, and that if you do anything in regard to taking control of that, then you're playing God. Well, I disagree with that vehemently. I think we've come to a place in America where we treat our pets better than we do each other. And that's unconscionable, it's immoral, and it needs to change. The Final Exit Network helps people like me do that. And it is about the one word, control. It gives control back to me. I decide when I've had enough, when it's no longer a quality of life that I'm willing to live. Now, we make those decisions. I'm an independent person, but I don't live an independent life. I live life in conjunction with people around me. Most importantly, my partner, Bevan. And so that decision won't just be mine alone. It will be us together and us looking at the quality of life that we have and us deciding together when is enough enough. And the Final Exit Network, they've got a whole system in place. They help you with legal matters. They help you with financial issues. Medical, you have to fill out a whole medical thing to qualify for their services. It doesn't cost anything. They're completely volunteer run. They have guides that help you through every step of the process. And it's just a group that I firmly believe is a good choice for a lot of people like me. It's not a choice for everyone. And in fact, I've learned that some people that engage their services never even use it at the end. They just like knowing that option is there. And that, again, gives them a sense of control. And that's what's most important. So I'm a firm believer, and it bypasses, maybe a question that someone will ask, but it bypasses the need to live in a state that has death with dignity laws. It doesn't have anything to do with any of that. You can do this in any state in the country because it's not illegal, what these services are. But we can talk more about that. I'm sure there's always more questions about that element than a lot of others, and I'll be happy to answer all those questions and point you in that direction. Some of you may have heard of their group. They're becoming a little more well-known and more public, but that's good. As far as us and Dying Out Loud, we're going to keep doing this. COVID is a little bump in the road, a big bump in the road. But we're starting to reschedule things in September, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward. And I'm going to continue to believe that I'm going to continue to progress slowly enough that we can travel into this second half of this year and probably all through next year. Bevan may have to carry me and put me on planes, but if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do. But we're going to go as far as we can go. I really love connecting with the people that we've been able to connect with and the people that have been touched and inspired by what we're doing and what we're saying, the inspirational messages I get from people all over the world. It really does energize me and give me a reason to keep getting up and going forward and looking forward to things and not just wasting away, waiting to die. So I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity to do things like this. And in that regard, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to reschedule a live meeting and all our California trip that we had planned either later this year or maybe this time next year, who knows. So I'm going to fold up my tent for now and open anything up. Matthew, you're going to monitor questions, I guess, and we'll go Q&A now.
Yeah, Dave, you had mentioned your daughter is disconnecting from you. I was wondering if that was like a sort of top-down kind of policy thing from the specific kind of religion you were in before, or if that was a personal choice of theirs.
Yeah, it was. That's a good way to put it. It was kind of a top-down. The church that we were in back then was very cult-like in the way that they did things from leadership on down. It was very controlling, manipulative kind of environment. Everything was kind of dictated as to what you could. Every aspect of your life was dictated. It wasn't, we were in that church a while, but it got more and more so that way over the years, which really was the reason that I got let go of that. I was on staff there, and I just more and more so had problems with the way that the leadership dictated every aspect of your life, even what kind of words you would say. You don't say this, you say that. And so when I left that church, and even before I lost my faith or let go of my faith, the pastor of that church pretty much taught he taught the shunning thing. He taught that you would separate family members for the sake of the kingdom. So my daughters were put in the position. Their husbands at the time were in an intern program where they were being groomed to be pastors in that movement as well. And so they were very tight with the pastor, and he was very tight with them, and they were put in the position essentially of having to choose between God and their father, and being the good little disciples of Jesus that I taught them to be. They chose God. And I don't fault them for that. It's just what they thought was the thing to do in order to be faithful to God and faithful to their spiritual leaders. So it was very much a top-down kind of mentality that they ascribed to. And then as years went by, as a couple of years went by and I became an atheist, they kind of doubled down on their need to keep their distance from me. It's not classic shunning now. If I send a message to one of them, I'm usually going to get a response, but there's no relationship to speak of. And I think that's because I'm an activist atheist, and they don't know quite what to do with that.
Cool. Yeah, we do a little bit of Scientology on our Twitch channel, so I was just wondering like how far down the rabbit hole the particular sect that you were in was. Thanks for your answer.
Yeah, the actual denomination was Foursquare Gospel, which is based in LA. It's an old Pentecostal brand that's kind of batshit crazy in a lot of ways. But yeah, that was more of a particular congregation's MO. This particular individual pastor was kind of the one that dictated that, not so much a movement thing like Scientology or some of the other shunning type movements. It was more of an individual pastor's operational procedure.
Okay, Dave, you're going back on mute. And I have Warren.
Good.
You're up.
I was just going to mention that a few years ago I'd read a book by the fellow that wrote The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And he then wrote a very short book a couple of years ago, and he was thanking people who'd written him and written emails to him or whatever. I think it was. But his book was named Gratitude, and that made me realize that, oh, I can look back on my life and think all the damn mistakes I've made, But also, I'm very happy with my two sons, how they turned out, and I'm amazed at the children that they've got. And so I pick up that word gratitude and feel like that should be an important part of my life and whatever. And I just wonder, you've done a hell of a lot of things, and how do you look upon what happened in the past?
Yeah, I think I agree with that, Warren. I've never been one to look back with regret. I don't think regret's a very costly emotion, and I don't give much room for it. I'm working on my book. I'm writing a book, and it's difficult as I walk back through my life and choices I made and things I did and different times in my life. I look back on that. Sometimes I just cringe, and I do kind of have to keep looking forward. And what I've done in the last year or so, I heard this quote by Maya Angelou, the poet, and she said this, and it's something I really adhere to. And she says, do the best you can do until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. and that's a really healthy way to live. Yeah. And that's how I view my Christianity, my transition from Christianity to atheism. I was doing the best I could. I was never, and most everyone is, most of us get up every day and we say, I'm going to do the best I can. Most of us, unless you're Donald Trump, don't get up every day thinking, how can I hurt people? Most of us get up and we're just doing the best we can. And sometimes we're wounded and we're reacting to that, or we're angry or sad about different things. And yeah, that affects choices that we make. That affects things we do that we wish we hadn't done or we could have done better. But when we do recognize that, then the best approach, in my opinion, is to say, okay, I've seen a better way to do that. I've seen a better way to think about that. I'm going to do that now. And then we don't get caught looking back with regret and wishing we'd have done this. And we can embrace our life with gratitude. And I'll be able to look through the whole fabric of my life and say, you know what, I did the best I could. And that's really all I want people to say at the end is Dave was a good guy, did the best he could. Yep. Yeah, he could be an asshole every now and then, Devin will tell you that. But for the most part, I'm doing the best I can.
Great. That's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Warren, you're back on mute. So we have Richard. That should be Dick Hewitson. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. I really appreciate so much of what you said, and I'm so in favor of physician-assisted dying, and I wanted to ask you if you have already discussed this with your physician, so if the time comes, you will have the help you need.
No, I haven't, because first of all, I don't live in a state where that's even legal. And that's one of the problems with this country. There's only a handful of states where that's even an option. And that being said, even those laws, most of them are based on the one that came out in Oregon. I think they were the first, and the other ones pretty much have mimicked it. And even those laws for someone like me are problematic. And just one aspect of them is this. You have to have two physicians, not just one, but two, who verify that you are within a 6-month window of death, that you're going to be dead within 6 months. Well, for someone like me with ALS and other issues, Alzheimer's and dementia, terminal cancer, there are some serious things there where a 6-month window is just simply not long enough. And I don't know how, I'm just to put it in blunt terms, because if I get to where I'm 6 months from drawing my last breath, I'm in pretty bad shape with ALS and with many other diseases, many other issues. Why do we put that kind of a window restriction on that? That I should be able to say, I'm not happy with the quality of my life. I can't do X, Y, and Z. I'm having to have everything done for me. Yeah, I might can lay in my bed for another year or 2 years and stay alive, but am I living? Am I living any quality of life? So for a law to tell me that it has to be within those parameters is, in my view, not good enough. The option that what I was talking about earlier is not restricted by any of that. It's simply helping me in my own life, on my own terms, in my own time, in the place I choose, with the people I choose. So I like the fact that there are some laws like that can enable people, that give people some other options. But in my view, it's not enough. And plus the fact that I'd have to move in with you in California, Richard, and I'm a terrible roommate. So.
Okay. I don't see anybody else with their hands up right now. I don't know if that's because people are. Oh, there we go. That's Senna and Alex. You are unmuted.
Okay. Yeah, Dave. The question I had in mind was, you've used terms I'm not familiar with, like Pentecostal and so on. I didn't expect you to go through a whole list of these terms, but it occurs to me there are an awful lot of things I don't understand about religious distinctions. Can you recommend a source? Or can you explain something?
Tell me, I'm having a hard time hearing you. The terms you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't understand a lot of those terms. I don't know what a Pentecostal is.
Oh.
There are a lot of other terms I don't understand. Can you recommend a source?
No, I just recommend just throwing the whole thing away. Don't worry about it. Pentecostal, charismatic, Pentecostal, those things, just different. Those are different ideologies or ways of practicing Christianity. For instance, the charismatic movement of the 70s and 80s was simply people getting what they call baptized with the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues. That's what I did. I spoke in tongues. And we believed that the Bible miracles were within reach, that God was the same yesterday, today, and forever, that if Jesus healed people, we could heal people. We believed all that stuff. We never saw it happen, but we believed it. And so Pentecostal is just, it is a denomination, so to speak, but there are many branches of it, many factions, so to speak, hundreds of them actually. So they're just different ways of practicing Christianity, I guess. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, I guess it's, I know as much now about it as I expected I'd learn from any answer, so yes.
Well, you could get a Bible dictionary, or if you're curious, in the wonderful world of Google now, you can just, if you want to know what's Pentecostal mean, you just Google it and you could read for the next 5 hours. If you want to know what charismatic Christian is, you could read that. Or, yeah, there's all kinds of explanations for those crazy ideas. They're all crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking also, when as I mentioned to you earlier, that I was kind of raised nominally Catholic. And at some point when I was quite young, it occurred to me that, all these stories about heaven and hell and what Jesus wants, they're just so stories. But I kind of found myself focusing on the idea of dying, and that is that, they don't want to scare you with the fact that you're going to die because you're a kid.
Right.
But adults seem to believe that too, and that's what really bothered me, that this is something adults believe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay for a kid to believe in Santa Claus, but if you got a 40-year-old man believing in Santa Claus, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And yet we got 40, 50, 60-year-old people who believe that Jesus is going to float down out of the sky, or that snakes actually talk, or any number of ideas that on the surface are preposterous, yet we believe them.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of it is that they were taught when they were young that you can't accept the idea that you're mortal.
Yeah. It's the thing I do. I've tried as much trouble with it as any, and all my ex-Christian friends. We all, every now and then, especially those of us who were pastors, we'll just look at each other and shake our head and say, "What the fuck were we thinking?"
Okay, we got more hands up, so I'm going to go to Carl. Carl, you need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Am I unmuted now?
Yep, you're good.
Hey, Carl.
Yeah, Dave, I was going to say I kind of confer. I was raised in a milieu of Catholicism, but I had a similar problem in transitioning away from that. And as I started to go away from that, I chose to call myself a non-believer for many years, because somehow or another the idea of the word atheist scares the bejesus out of a lot of people. So, and later on, it got to be more acceptable to declare yourself that. But then I became a humanist, which focuses on human values
Right.
now. And so then I started calling myself a humanist. Then people started asking, they don't know what the hell that is, some people do, but most don't. Then I find myself into this long explanation of what it is. So I just wanted to know, as you were making the transition, did you pretty much sounds like you just came out, be like a gay person. They came out.
Yeah.
Or, and that's what happened to me. I finally decided if all these gay people can do this, why can't I do it? But anyway, speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, I at first I was like you. I was a little reticent to use the word atheist. So I did the soft agnostic for a while, and then I mean, technically I'm an agnostic atheist. Agnostic just simply means I don't know. In that sense, we're all agnostics. None of us know. None of us know what the hell's going on. But my definition of who I am as a person would be I'm a humanist, because I believe in humanity. I believe the goodness of humanity, and that we are what we are. We're our only hope. That humanity is what's going to get us through this. There's no outside help coming. There's nobody coming to save us. There's no Spider-Man. There's nobody. It's us. But the reason I use the word atheist by design now is because of the very thing that you said and that I experienced as well. It elicits such a visceral response from people. And so you're going to try to harvest their organs. And the reason that I'm very vocal about being an atheist now is that I want to do my little part to take that stigma away. And until more and more of us are vocal about the fact that, yes, I'm an atheist, that doesn't mean I'm mad or angry or mean or wicked or anything. It just simply means I don't believe in your God. And I've said this before. I tell Christians or anybody, I'll say, you and I are both atheists. I just believe in one fewer God than you do. And so when you break it down into those terms, it makes it less scary and it takes the stigma away. And so I feel like I've got a responsibility, because I only have one voice. I'm only one person. But I have a responsibility to use my voice to help take that stigma away. Because I feel like until more and more of us do that, it's going to still have, and it still has that stigma in this country today. We aren't trusted. People don't trust atheists. You can't run for office in some states if you're an avowed atheist. So we've got a lot of work yet to do. But I agree with you in terms of who I am. I'm a humanist. But in response to religion, I'm an atheist. And the word atheist wouldn't even exist if there wasn't the word theist. But because we're such a theist society, I feel like I have to use the word atheist more and more so. But that's a good question. I saw Mary Jane raising a hand. I couldn't even find a way to do a raise hand, but anyway.
Well, I have Emma, who's been waiting with their hand up for a little while. So Emma, you are up.
All right. So my view on humanists is that we need to take care of the world. And so to take care of the world, we need to identify the problems of the world. And when I look at religion, I never heard people complain that, oh, my religions are so supernatural, I can't stand it. Okay, or they were talking about so unrealistic stuff, and I can't stand it. And most of the complaint that I heard about religion is actually about the pastor, about the minister, about the priest. Okay, so I think as a humanist, we need to look at the real problem of religions is actually the organization structure. If I were somebody who speak to a lot of people every day or weekly, and people bow to me for my authority, chances are I'm going to think I'm kind of like a god. Okay, and this is something I think we all should be aware of, is that you cannot give people too much of a platform or make them the person who tell people how to live. And so I think that is the problem with the religion today. And I also have a question for Dave. Dave, do you have fear and about the future, and how do you deal with your fear?
Yeah, I agree with you about the religion and about the ego of spiritual leaders. I was one, and I know how much of a ego trip that can be. And I think you're right. I think the leaders, the priests and the prophets and the popes and the pastors and all those people are maintaining the structure because they don't want to lose their power, kind of like politicians. It's all the P word, isn't it? You don't want to lose the power and authority you have, so you maintain the structure and keep people in line. A lot of religion, I think the core of religion is based upon fear and control. And if you can take those two elements away, it's going to crumble. Speaking of fear, no, I really don't have any fears other than 4 more years of Trump. But I that's more of a dread, a gray blanket of dread that I feel settling on me. I'm afraid to even allow myself to hope for another outcome, but nonetheless, I don't fear the Reaper because I don't feel like it's anything to fear. To me, it's just going to sleep and not waking up. There's not. It's not like I wake up on the other side of the wall and go, "Oh my God, I'm dead." We don't have any awareness, in my opinion. So there's nothing. There's no sense of a thing to fear. What I am, I don't like to use the word fear, but what I want to avoid is missing out on what life I have. So I'd be, a simple phrase would be, I don't fear death, I just fear not living. And by that I mean, I want to make the most of this life and get what I can out of it, and not let the fear of death take that away from me. And that's what a lot of people have expressed to me, is that, especially growing up as an evangelical, with fear of death and hell pounded into you, they've expressed that the fear of death has infringed upon their quality of life. And that's a tragedy to me.
Well, I wasn't really thinking about that. I was thinking about you become like totally dependent on your caretaker and you couldn't really take care of yourself. Do you feel fear about that?
No, because she's really cute and she takes good care of me. So, yeah, I do. I guess fear is not the right word to use for that, because I do. ALS, we have this thing, ALS stands for always losing something. And so what that means is I'm gradually going to lose the ability to do more and more things. And that's going to require me to need help doing more and more things. And so I'm not, I guess fear, whatever, I'm not looking forward to that. That's the uncomfortable or the difficult part of all of this, is the gradual loss of my freedom and my independence and my ability to take care of myself, and then becoming more and more dependent upon other people. And that's why it's important to me and others in my situation, in my view, that we have the control of being able to say, okay, that's enough. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to put people through this. I'm not going to put myself through this. That's just enough. So, yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and that is the hardest part of this whole thing, is realizing what's coming down the road and how difficult that's going to be.
Thank you.
Okay, Marion.
Okay, thank you, because I couldn't find this speaker hand up thing down there.
Yeah, it's
so thank you for reaching my wave. Okay, yeah. And Dave for seeing it. Thank you. So I'm just wanting to know a little bit more about this final exit, because I already know about some about compassionate choices death with dignity. You said why one of them wasn't as good, but I'm sure you researched a lot and you think Final Exit is the best. And I'm just wondering though, even with Final Exit, do they actually provide you with, something that you or someone, for anyone, but you as general, you or anyone else can, just actually help you die? And what about if there's different situations, but let's say you're something that you could, like a poison, for example, you could take, even if you're in, say, assisted living, they're not going to give you this little pill or anything, something that you can do pretty much on your own, or do you need to have a really good friend that is willing to provide something? And also, does this not require a physician being involved right from the start and signing forms, or does it require that? Things like that.
It doesn't require that. They do require you to send your medical records to them so that there's an actual diagnosis of a fatal illness, and it's not just you having a bad day and wanting to check out. As with anything of this nature, it can be a slippery slope, and there are needs for regulations and guidelines. Obviously, it's not just something we want to say, yeah, whoever wants to off themselves can just go do it. The reality, just to put it bluntly, suicide is not illegal. It's not illegal to take your own life. What is illegal is to assist someone in doing that. So the organization helps you procure the materials that you need. There are a couple of options. There's one primary one they use, and it's a nitrogen tank with a hood. Just to be in very, I hate to sound, if this is, check out if it's too much for you. But they help you get the equipment, show you how to use it, make sure you're able to use it, make sure that you are fully capable of mental and physical operation of what you need to make sure this is what you want to do and how you want to do it. You're not supposed to have any friends helping you or anybody helping you. Pardon? Oh.
I just muted Marion for the moment because she was having a call, but keep going, Dave.
So it's, and I can, we can give you more details. Anybody that wants more details, it's on the website. I'll be happy to share with you personally. But yeah, they've got legal staff. They've got legal people on board. Everything you need to get everything in order so that you're going by the guidelines. But there doesn't need to be a doctor involved. It doesn't matter where you live. It's you being in control of your own ending. And that's the beauty of it to me. There may be other choices for other people that are just as good. But for me, this was, to me, the best option that I saw out there. You want to unmute her if she has a secondary question?
No, I just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, and check back on the website, my website, daveoutloud.com. We'll have a link on the final, but you can look at theirs. It's finalexitnetwork.org if you want to get more information on that, or reach out to me personally. I'd be happy to share with you.
I don't see anybody else with their hand up right now.
Paul Gilbert.
Paul, okay. I gotta find him. It is a lot easier for me if you can figure out how to raise your hand, and that's if you go to the participants window. So that's if you have your mouse over the regular window, down at the bottom there's a participants button. They'll bring up the window, and then it's either at the bottom row of buttons under participants or under more. But I will go ahead. I saw Paul waving his hand, so that's the problem. It keeps moving. Oh, he got it now. Okay. Paul.
I just first I just want to observe that it's really nice to see Helen. Whom we haven't seen for a while, and that's just really a pleasure. also to see Emma, whom some of us have seen in the past now and then at the Unitarian Church, is the group that meets there, and to see all those other faces. The other is just to hear your voice, Dave. I grew up in West Tennessee, and it just sounds more natural than how other people sound.
It's the right way to talk, isn't it?
Works for me. And the other is just to appreciate your sense of humor, which I think basically is to say a sense of proportion. What's important and what's less important. And you have that sense of equanimity that comes with getting those things straightened out. And so mostly I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Gotta unmute myself. Okay. Do we have any other? Yeah, we do. I see Marie. Now I got to find her in the.
There's Marie, and Dana T had her hand up.
Okay. I'm going with Marie right now. Marie?
Hi. I looked down at the bottom of my screen. I didn't see a more, and I wasn't able to do anything with the participants, so thank you for seeing me. Okay. My question is not really a question, it's a comment to Dave. I think all of us look back on our lives and see things that we've done that we wouldn't do the same way now. And I think it's interesting that you are able to look back on what you've done with on your previous views with such equanimity, particularly since it involves loss of family. That must be very tough. That's really, I guess it's a comment, not a question.
Yeah, it is tough, Emma. I mean, I spent quite a few years really kind of wallowing in that, if you will. And it took a toll on me. And I just had to reach a place, if I was going to be mentally healthy, I had to reach a place of disengagement with it. And it may sound harsh, but I just could not live my life wishing and hoping for something that I couldn't do anything about, and trying to make it different and trying to change it when I had no control and no ability to do that. And so I had to just kind of let it go. And so now what I get from them or from anyone that I've let go, and I've never axed anyone out of my life, and I never will. I live an open door policy. I'm who I am, and I'm doing the best I can to live the best life I can. If you're okay with that, then we can do life together on whatever level you choose or whatever level it happens. If you're not okay with who I am, then that's not my problem, that's yours. Because I'm who I am, and I'm living the best way that I can. And if that's not okay with you, and that would include a friend or a family member or whoever, I'm sorry, but it's not my problem. I'm not going to change who I am to try to accommodate you, because then we end up trying to be 10 different people to 10 different groups of people that want us to be a certain way or think a certain way. And I'm not smart enough to do that. I don't know how to do that. So yeah, it did take a toll on me, and it's not something that I'm happy about, but it's also nothing it's something I have no control over. I can't do anything. My daughters know that I'm open and I want to see them and want them in my lives, but they just can't do it or won't do it. So I'm going to have to move on, and I'm going to have to have the people in my life who want me in their life. And that's all I can do.
Thanks.
But I appreciate you saying that.
I just wanted to add, I feel some sorrow for your daughters in a way, because I'm old, I'm 76. I've known people that have died and have been separated from their children in kind of the same way you are. And having seen those children afterwards, the sorrow that they feel that they weren't able to look at their situation in a broader way. I think down the line they'll have a hard time with it too.
Yeah, I do feel bad for them. I think there will come a day when they'll wish they'd done things differently.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want that. I don't want them to have regrets and things. That,
Sure.
I said earlier, regrets just a very costly emotion.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Was there anybody else? Okay. Dana T.
Dana T.
Okay, Dana, you're unmuted.
Okay.
Uh-oh, she muted herself.
Oh, she remuted. Okay, try this again. Oh, now I can't unmute her. Yeah, there we go.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
All right. First, I wanted to express my admiration because I'm always in awe of people who are in the thick of religion and have the wherewithal to step back and do as you did, question, research, explore, and as you said, come to the logical conclusion that you need to check it all. So hats off to you. And my question is, how did your parents take this when you found religion and became very zealous?
Well, they thought we were crazy. My older brother kind of led the way in that. He was radically saved at college a year before I was, and he's an evangelical pastor to this day in East Texas, and he and I don't have a lot in common anymore either. But no, they thought we were crazy because we were, and we were Jesus freaks. But gradually over the years, interestingly enough, it never really took with my younger brother. I was the middle of three boys, and then I've got a half sister from my mom and stepdad, and she's become religious in her later years, and my mom has become this little Jesus freak herself. And she's 80-something years old, 86 years old, and she's just all about Jesus. And she is just torn up that I'm an atheist, or as she says, that I call myself an atheist. So I must not be a real atheist, but it's just, it's tearing her up that she's just, she doesn't like the fact that her son's an atheist. And so all those kind of things have shifted over the years. It's been kind of a crazy ride.
But you kept the relationship. You guys still,
you're
still in their lives.
Yeah, we're able to talk and stuff. I mean, obviously, we don't have a lot to talk about. I mean, all the rest of my extended family is conservative, evangelical, Trump lovers, gun lovers. I mean, we're far apart on the spectrum politically and religiously as one can be. And so there's not a lot of common ground there. But if I need something, if they need something, we're there.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have Richard has his hand up, so you're on, Richard.
Thank you. Emma brought up something earlier, and Dana made a comment along the same line about how people see the clergy. And some of you already know that I was a clergy person at one time too, and am now an atheist. But I just wanted to comment that one of the first steps in my deconversion was that I really began to realize the effect I had on people because they thought that I was a messenger of God and anything I said was okay. Yeah. And that's a very humbling thing. But that was one of the first steps that led me to my total deconversion. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an odd phenomenon to be sure that people look to you as some kind of a spokesman for God. And it's very intoxicating, if you will, to be looked at that way. There's a good friend of mine, Darrell Ray. He's a retired psychologist. He founded the Recovering from Religion. Recovering from Religion. Check that out if you ever get a chance. But he and I wrote an article recently together about the psychological components involved in someone who chooses to be a pastor or a spiritual leader, a spokesperson for God. What is it in us that drives us to that, or that that we're drawn to, and it was an interesting study that we did. We just kind of batted the ideas back and forth for a couple of days, and we actually submitted the article to American Humanist magazine. I think they rejected it, but American Atheist magazine took it, and so it's going to come out in that magazine in a month or two. But him coming from a psychologist's viewpoint and me coming from an ex-pastor's viewpoint, we kind of tossed around what our thoughts were in regard to what causes people to want to be spiritual leaders or feel called to that kind of an idea, which, as we said, is kind of crazy when you look at it now. I mean, thinking that I'm some special spokesperson for God, or that I would want to be, and the responsibility of that, but also the ego that would feed. It feeds the ego big time. Not healthy by any means.
Okay. I have Emma. Emma, you're unmuted.
Yes, I do think that the reason why people choose a certain profession determine what kind of professional they are going to be. I find that people, the problems between people usually fall into 1 to 3 categories, which is desire to feel superior than other people, desire to be seen as an authority figure, and desire to have inappropriate control. And it's a very common desire among people. And sometimes people choose a certain profession because these professions give them that kind of satisfaction. And I think this is the reason why churches stay the same over hundreds and thousands of years. Okay, like today churches are not that different from the church it was 200 years ago, 300 years ago, in terms of how they run the church. And there's very little changes. Technology has changed, the world has changed, the political system have changed, but not church. And so there is something about not looking at the problem in the church and not wanting to improve it.
Yeah, that's good. We're narcissists too. Most of us that want to be leaders.
Okay. I see Paul has his hand up in the video. Okay, Paul?
I think it's risky to generalize too much about the role of pastors and preachers. My father was a Methodist minister. I have a seminary degree. Our relationship did not change when I recognized that, no, that's not where I fit. That's not what I believe. I didn't have any strained relationships with my extended family. They still like me or like me less. They might like somebody else for other reasons than that. My father's ministry, his sermons, and it's surprising how much I remember from them, had more to do with poverty, with Hull House on the west side of Chicago, or poverty in the area where we lived, or he really saw himself as a pastor, as someone who related to people, whether they were in his church or somewhere else. He was just wrong about some of his views. And there are others that I wouldn't want to spend 15 minutes with. But it's a mixed bag. And it seems to me we have to be careful to see people as they are, where they are, and relate to them that way.
That's a good point. I like to make the distinction between evangelical Christianity and the other more mainstream or progressive forms of Christianity, because that's the world I live in, was evangelicalism, and that's really a lot of dogma and a lot of fundamentalist ideology that seeks to control other people and coerce other people to believe and live like they do. And that's the more dangerous element of Christianity as I see it. The kind that your dad was espousing was more social justice and caring for people, and there's a lot of value in that. But the ideas that are driving the religious right these days, and the evangelicals who are supportive of Trump and his madness, they're the ones trying to dictate and control how everyone in America lives their lives. They want this to be, it's more nationalism than it is Christianity, in my view. Right.
Is there anybody else? I don't see any hands up, either in the participants window or in videos. I think we're kind of at a point now where I can just, I'll go ahead and let everybody allow you to unmute yourself. So you can unmute yourself and we can do just more of a general conversation. Just be aware of talking over other people at the same time.
Right.
I want to thank you, Matt, you did a good job.
You're welcome.
Yes, you did.
But I agree, I don't find any hand up down under this participants, and it led me to chat. And that's not oral chat, it's writing. So
yeah,
we'll take another look at that sometime, and if we ever do something like this again.
I'll try to find a video that explains everything and get it passed out to the membership so people can.
I see if you scroll down, if you hold your cursor down below the last person's picture, you see the chat, and then it says share screen, and it says participants. If you click on that, that's what you're talking about, right, Matthew?
Yes. If you click on that button, then you'll have the participants window pop up on the right.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of buttons at the bottom of that window. It's either on the bottom row or there's like a more button that has it.
It says mutiny or raise hand.
I think it's different on phones.
Oh, yeah, but
it might be different on phones, but there still should be a raise hand button.
On the Mac, on MacBook?
That's what I'm on.
Oh, here we go. Now I see it.
Under participants.
Yeah.
You click on participants.
So when I click that,
it pops up on the right.
Except I don't see
chat pops up on the right with everyone's name on it.
That's what you want. You want with everybody's name on it.
That's what I want.
At the bottom of that, it says raise your hand.
Ah, way down. Okay. Got it.
Way down there.
It's not on my Android phone.
Light type. Okay. So to close that, you just go back to participants, I guess, and click that.
Oh, here we go.
Thank you.
Here we are. Now that we're done, we figured out how to use it.
It was wonderful hearing from you, and it was all great. And now I had a tech lesson in there too, so I'm grateful for that also. Thank you.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to see you guys in person and be at a meeting in the near future.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. That'd be fun. We feel like we know each other now, right?
Yeah.
I think this was Dana's first time. Was it, Dana?
Yes. And actually, you can get this on the phone.
Dana.
What's up? Great to see you, Dick.
And
now
Dave, I'll just tell you, my oldest son lives not far from you in Murfreesboro.
Oh yeah, that's the actual town that I was living in.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. I moved in with some good friends of mine there, and then Bevan whisked me away to Charlotte here. So, but when we go back to Nashville, that's where we stay, is in Murfreesboro.
Oh, very good. Yeah. Well, I know he goes up to Nashville when he wants to get a big dinner.
Yeah, it's only about 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now that I've been to a couple of these, I may attend one of the meetings in person, although 11 a.m. on a Sunday is a little rough for me because sometimes I'm out late, like when we're not sheltering in place, because I DJ and whatnot, and maybe showing up hungover on 6 hours of sleep to a humanist meeting isn't the best idea.
That'd be fine.
At least I'd be
Just
quiet.
come on in.
Yeah, come on in with your hangover and bring a little bourbon. We'll just do hair of the dog, and you can just keep going.
Oh man, Sundays are busy for me. I'd probably just be with a cup of coffee, to be honest.
Okay.
That works too.
Yep.
I'm wondering if we could call a few people that we typically have, like Jerry and Dana and Carlos and Jacqueline.
That'd be great.
And see if we can get a few more people on here. It works pretty well.
Yeah. I
How
can
many
call
do you
Jerry and
typically
Dan.
have when you have your meetings? When you have your meetings, how many folks are there usually?
Well, we usually have like around, it's between 20 and 30 people, depending on what the topic is and stuff when we do it in person. This one, the online through Zoom, it seems to be growing. We do have more than last week. And we also are streaming it out on Twitch. And I can't really check to see how many people we have on Twitch right now. Does look like Senna and Alex came back, which is good.
Twitch has been fluctuating up and down. It's going to be a mix of people from the humanist community who either can't or don't want to participate in the Zoom thing, and then people who follow my channel on Twitch. So it's been kind of fluctuating. It's been anywhere between 4 and 25.
People are getting stir crazy and looking for anything to do these days, I think. Quiet.
It looks like Senna and Alex are trying to talk, but I don't think should be able to unmute yourself.
There you go.
Yeah, we were actually just talking to each other here.
Okay.
What happened while we were gone? Were you guys talking about us? I wanted to say at some point that when you were talking about looking back in your life and feeling bad about things, we've got a standard definition of humanism, but I think part of it should always be, we're only human.
Yeah. We're all doing the best we can.
Yeah. There are things I've done I'm ashamed of, but I'm going to forget about that.
Tell us about it, Alex.
I've sold the book rights already, sorry.
Okay. We'll look for the movie.
Yeah.
Hi, Greg. Good to see your face.
Part of the concept is that humanists extend the concept of us to all humans.
Mm.
Yes, and to our dogs. Yes.
We do a thing on Wednesday on our channel about we'll call them atheists who we don't think are humanists.
Oh.
It's like,
Are those the angry atheists?
Yeah, I think I went through a little bit of that phase myself too, but my mom kind of snapped me out of it. She was like, "Why are you so mad?" She's like, "You've never even been religious. They didn't do anything to you."
That's a good point.
And I mean, she's right. I was never raised religious, so what was I mad about? Like what I mean? Like they didn't take any of my life from me. My head was never filled with magical stories. And so like being strident was more about like being able to be out as an atheist, like in the early 2000s. And I think maybe a lot of us went through that metamorphosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. It's been a storm here.
Oh.
It's 3, what time is it here? It's 3:45 here.
Oh. Are we done?
Dave,
Yes.
I have a question for you about other ALS patients. You probably run into patients like you, right? And what do you think their reaction to their illnesses are? And what can they do to make their life better?
Well, you talking about me running into other people with ALS?
Yeah, what do you think about their life being having ALS?
Well, there's not a lot you can do. There's a couple of treatments that are in this trial stage that may be approved in the next year or two that show some good results that we're hopeful for. But I don't go to, with ALS, there's not a lot of doctor visits. We have an ALS clinic that we can go to every couple of months just to check in with a neurologist and a speech pathologist and physical therapist and people like that, just to kind of manage the symptoms the best you can. But in terms of medications and doctor visits, there's not really a lot. It's just a matter of tracking your progress. And hopefully, you track it. Hopefully you're moving slowly. There are people that we've met in the last year and gotten to know whose progress is a lot more advanced. I mean, I've realized that mine is slow compared to a lot of others that we've gotten to know. So you just try to help each other manage the best you can. There are resources to help with equipment and things like that as it's needed, but we haven't needed that yet.
Do you feel you have lost friends because of ALS?
No, I've gotten friends because of ALS. I've gained friends. Because I've been so vocal and open about having it, and I've been so visible and doing the stuff I'm doing, traveling and speaking and stuff, I have hundreds of friends I have right now, in person and virtual friends like this, people I've met from all over the world who I didn't have a year ago, and I would never have connected with them if I hadn't been doing this. We had an example of that is about 9 months ago, 10 months ago, Bevan and I were spending the weekend, and we booked because I didn't know what was going to happen with my symptoms. My special place is the beach, the Gulf Coast of Florida, where I used to vacation a lot. And I decided I was going to rent a really nice beach house on the coast and invite all my friends who could get there to come in. Everyone could rent a room for whatever nights they were there and pay a portion of the rental of the beach house. And we got a really nice house on the beach. It slept 20 people, huge house. And we rented that for the second week of February in the Gulf Coast of Florida. And people came from all over the country, and even a guy came from England who I'd gotten to know through my talks on different podcasts and things, and he was needing to come to the States for some business, and he decided to come and to time his trip so that he could be at the beach house with us for a couple of days. Max from London, England. He's a friend now, and when we go to England on our trip, whenever that's rescheduled, we're going to see him, and he and I are going to have cigars in the cigar lounge that Winston Churchill used. I never would have had that friendship if I hadn't gotten ALS and hadn't started talking about the things I'm talking about. So conversely, I haven't lost any friends because of ALS. I've gained hundreds more that I never would have had. So I consider myself very lucky in that regard.
Yeah.
I like cigars, by the way. Bevan is not happy that I like cigars. You'll be happy to know, darling, that the weather's bad enough today that I can't go have one, so. She puts up with a lot. She's my rock. I'm looking for chat. From Helen to everyone, I'm present but quiet. My sister's in another room participating in her church service online. The above is from Helen Athy, who doesn't have much.
Athy.
Athy.
Wrong A.
Where is Helen? I don't see her. Oh, there you are. Hi, Helen. Hey.
Hi.
How's your sister's church service going?
Well, it's pretty quiet, but last night when I was getting help from Matt getting set up, she said I was being too loud.
Oh, no. Yeah. Well, good to see you.
Thank you.
So, Dave, ALS, is that a genetic situation?
No, it attacks people very randomly.
Oh, really?
Well, there's 5% of them are genetic or passed down through the families, but that's a very small percentage of the whole. It's just a motor neuron disease that just randomly affects whoever. I don't know what. They don't know what causes it or why some people get it, and they don't know. They know hardly anything about it.
There was some documentary on the teens just started. You watched the first episode of it, and this was something similar to ALS, except it actually strikes children at a very young age. It is genetic, and the woman who's doing research on it, she got all the families who had these children to make videos and to contact their health centers and centers and so on. And the media to get funding for the research that they're doing.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of research, and there's a stem cell treatment that's just finished phase 3 trials, and it shows it's the most promising of anything that we've seen yet come down the pike. We tried to get in on the trial, but I was too old for it. And another trial that we tried to get in on, I was progressing too slowly. So I didn't fit they have narrow criterion for these trials, which I understand because they have to do the research and the testing. It has to have a confined element, but so far I haven't been able to get in on them. But the one drug that we're very positive about that shows promise is maybe a year and a half away from possibly being available. So if I can hang on till then it might be, Bevan might be stuck with me for quite a long time.
Do they think it'll reverse the effects?
No, it's not showing a lot of promise in reversing them. What it hopes to do, what it's shown results with, is that it kind of stops you where you are. So I won't get back the strength that I've lost, but I won't lose any more strength.
The program, the documentary, or the series of documentaries was called The Intimate History of the Gene.
What is it?
The Gene and Intimate History.
Oh, okay.
The other thing I want to ask you, when you got a divorce, how did your wife at the time take that? I mean, a lot of evangelicals think there's no such thing.
Well, no, our church divorced quite freely for some reason. That was okay with them. But she wasn't in favor of it. I was the one that wanted to change things. She was somehow willing to live with an atheist. I was just not willing to live with an evangelical Christian. So, I just came to the place where it was problematic for me to be partnered with someone whose ideologies were that far removed from mine. And it wasn't her fault. She's not the one that changed. I did. So, it was amicable and it wasn't, contentious, but it was something that she was sad about.